Southwestern Family of Companies welcomes you to the Action Catalyst. Each week, our diversely and amazingly accomplished guests share their insights and inspirations to help us ignite our own. So let's invest attention together to breathe, to reflect and refocus, and decisively defeat that voice we call Mr. Mediocrity. Then let's enjoy moving forward to make a positive difference in our world.
Today's guest is Dominic Zijlstra, founder of Traverse.link, an app that helps professionals learn faster using science-backed learning methods. He studied in the Netherlands, Germany and Brazil and holds a master's degree in engineering physics. Dominic has worked as a space systems engineer for Airbus, and a data scientist, before starting his entrepreneurial journey. His app has helped over 10,000 professionals learn skills like languages, programming, marketing, psychology and more. Dominic also hosts the Super Learning Professionals podcast. We hope you enjoy.
Well, everyone, this is Dan Moore. Welcome to the Action Catalyst. And I'm very excited that our guest is coming to us from the Netherlands, Mr. Dominic Zijlstra. Dominic, you have an incredible background. We're going to hear all about it. Welcome to the Action Catalyst.
Yeah, thanks, Dan. Very excited to be here.
This gentleman has been a data scientist. He has been a rocket scientist. So for the people that say it doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure some things out, I think maybe it does take a rocket scientist to figure some things out. And you have definitely done that with Traverse.link. Anyway, if you don't mind, walk us back through some of the key moments in your past that led you to where now you have created this wonderful, wonderful learning system, Traverse.link.
I grew up, my grandfather, he had a farm in Germany. He built his own business there. So I went to Germany initially to study physics and engineering. And I took some time to integrate. You know, people can be a bit closed there. So I had to learn the language. Eventually, I made friends there. I made very close friends there. And later on, I went to Sweden on an exchange program. I met a lot of people from all over the world. And that's when I really started to feel like more than just a citizen, more like a world citizen almost. And at the end of that, I actually met a girl from Brazil, and we started dating, and I decided I wanted to go and graduate, and I wrote my master thesis there in aerospace, as you already mentioned. Not quite a rocket scientist, but definitely the area. Yeah. Yeah, and then I came back to Europe, and that relationship ended, and I got a job in spacecraft engineering at Airbus, and I actually met my partner, my current wife, at that point, and she's from China. That's when I really kind of hit a roadblock, was because whenever I went to China to visit her friends, her parents, they couldn't speak any English. They could only speak Chinese. So I had tried to learn Chinese just like I had learned other languages before, but it just turned out to be impossible. It was much harder. So that's when I really took a step back, and I took a look at how I had approached learning in the past. So I had learned several languages. I had learned physics, rocket science, data science, but actually the methods that I used were kind of weak. They were not effective enough to learn something as challenging as Chinese. So that's when I really dove into the science behind learning, and I learned about meta learning, like effective memorization techniques like spaced repetition, active recall. And then I came up with a method that I actually used myself to learn Mandarin Chinese. And after that, I discovered it's much more broadly applicable. So that I used it to learn other languages. I used it to learn programming skills. At that point, I was actually planning to move to China to really get really fluent in Chinese, get a job there. But that was when COVID struck as well. So that was for me another turning point where the universe was telling me, well, you're not supposed to go there and just be like a teacher, you know. Instead, you have to take this system and bring it out to the world. So I turned into an app. That app is Traverse.link, and it incorporates a lot of the scientific methods that I used to learn. And now people are using it to learn all kinds of things, from languages to like medicine to skills like marketing, psychology, and that has come full circle again. So I'm actually working with an online Chinese course now. They're using the app as well. So now I've really been able to turn my personal learning method into something that people from all over the world can use whatever they want to learn.
I think it's a phenomenal story. And you are a citizen of the world. Clearly, you've traveled so much. You've lived in various places. I'm also married to an international. My wife is Portuguese. Esposa portuguesa, muito bem.
Eu falo um pouco também.
Também. And I know that that ability to learn is such an important thing, but people have mental blocks about things they can learn and can't learn, don't they?
Yeah, definitely. And I think a lot of those mental blocks are actually already instilled by school. In school, we kind of have to learn a fixed set of things. We have to learn the curriculum. We have to learn to pass a certain exam, and that's it. Then we move on to the next thing. And I think there's a couple of problems with that. So for one, it kind of kills off our curiosity. Like if you look at a child, he will explore and dive into something and find out everything he can about it, and it's very, very curious. But there's actually research that shows that our education system kind of reduces that natural curiosity over time. Another thing that it does, it's because we have those exam scores, people think that, oh well, I'm bad at like math. I'll never learn math. So it establishes this fixed mindset, almost like this cannot be changed. I'm bad at math. But the reality is that our brains are incredibly flexible. The key to overcoming those roadblocks when getting stuck is adapting what's called like a growth mindset.
Mm-hmm.
So we actually accept that by using the right methods, we can approach any subject, like no matter what level we are coming from, and start learning it, start getting better at it, like one step at a time. As long as we are confident that we can actually do that, can actually achieve that, and that might take a long time. And the key is building that learning habit. So even if we improve just 1% a day, it accumulates over time. It adds up to, I think it's like 38 times in a year due to the power of compounding. So the key to overcoming those roadblocks is really establishing that growth mindset and building an open habit, and also not being afraid of failure, because you will fail. It's almost inevitable when we try new things. At the beginning, we're gonna be bad at it, but accepting that we will fail and that it's good to fail, and that failure actually strengthens us. Failure makes us better, and that's what will help us overcome those roadblocks eventually.
Well, it seems like we have two strikes against our current education system, because the worst grade you can get in education is an F, which means you failed. And also the fact that so many people are rated according to whether they got the right answer. And there may be more than one right answer, but as long as we're training to get the right answer, it's going to affect some people's confidence and certainly their creativity.
Exactly. Yeah.
Let's dig in a little bit more to this growth mindset and how somebody could develop it. Let's say, for example, that I've been a pretty good student in English and history, and I love to read. But again, mathematics is sort of like, no, get away from me, math stuff. What are some things that I can do on a daily basis to eliminate that negative belief that I've got and to build that growth mindset?
Yeah. So basically what I've found when learning those different things, like, learning languages, learning new fields like data science, which also involves a lot of math, is that every learning process can be broken down in more or less the same steps. And if you follow those steps, you will still face challenges, but they will be manageable. They won't stop you from achieving what you want to learn. And the first step is basically drawing out a map of what you want to learn. So there's so much information out there. It's very easy to get overwhelmed, especially now in the digital age. So the first step is really drawing out a map and creating almost like a tree of knowledge, where you separate the really important things from the small details and really get that clear in your head. And once you've done that, you have identified basically the place to start. So basically the root of learning. And from there, you can then take the next step, which is building the initial understanding. And a good way to build understanding is by writing and drawing in your own words. You can have a textbook full of math with intimidating equations, but you're never going to get anywhere unless you start doing it yourself. So take the simplest equation you can find, write it down, take an exercise from the book maybe, and just start doing it and start making it your own. And an important part of this process is also getting feedback. And that feedback can either come internally from yourself. So you struggle to solve a problem. So that's feedback that, well, maybe you need to try another approach. Or it can be feedback from other people who are ahead of you. So maybe a teacher or a friend who's slightly better at math suggests, well, you've taken this step to solve that equation, but let's try the other approach instead. And that kind of feedback improves our understanding. And then the third step after that is the memorization. So once we figured out the right principles, the right ways of doing things, we need to memorize those so that we can apply them next time we come across a similar problem. And there are several techniques for improving memorization. A very important one is called spaced repetition. It basically means that we don't do it all in one go, but we space out our practice over time. So maybe we do one exercise the first day, another exercise the second day, and then we take it like an even bigger break. And during that break, our unconscious brain keeps processing. And then maybe we try it again on the fifth day, and we will suddenly notice, hey, I got it. Like in the back of my mind, something happens and it just clicked.
Right.
So that's very important to really build the long-term memory. And then, the last final step is actually applying it in real life. Because even when you know how to solve a math equation, if it's not going to be useful for you in real life, after a couple of months, you will probably have forgotten how to solve it. So you have to find some kind of exercise for you that leads you towards a goal you want to attain. Maybe it's like you want to construct a shed next to your house, and you need to do some math to figure out like how much wood you need to buy, for example. So really apply it in real life and find a deliberate practice that you can do periodically to practice that skill and drill down on that skill. So those 4 steps, like first mapping it out, building the initial understanding, solidifying the memory, and finally like applying it in real life. Following those speeds up the learning of any skill or subject.
Dom, 3 days ago, I downloaded the Traverse.link onto my computer and began to create my own process here, following what you suggested here. And I can share with our listeners that one of the beauties of the whole process is because it's our own words, we tend to believe ourselves more than we might believe someone else. The other thing that Dom does so well is he uses the ancient technique of a flashcard. And most of us remember learning our multiplication tables where the teacher would hold up the card and say 3 times 4 is, and the class would yell it out. But because they're flashcards that we've created ourselves, it has terminology, even humor, that can help us remember something in a much better way. So I commend you on the program that you've created. It's very easy to use. I get an email from you every day asking how I'm doing, which is really nice. So that's part of the feedback too.
Yeah, it's great. It's great to hear that.
And since I'm a real believer that our limiting beliefs hold us back in so many areas, this is very, very fruitful. I think it's a tremendous project you've got going here.
Yeah, and I love what you mentioned, like really making it personal is so very, very helpful for learning, because very often when we learn from a textbook, it's abstract concepts which are not very, very memorable, not very easy to understand. But instead, like humans are very good at learning by stories. Like tell us a particular story about a CEO that made a particular mistake and the company failed, and we will remember that, oh, when I have to run a company, I need to do things in a way that avoids that particular mistake. So we will remember much better from stories. And this personalization that you mentioned, like writing it in your own words, adding humor, adding all kinds of weird personal details, is really helps so much to acquire new skills, to learn new subjects.
Right. And I love the spaced repetition, this layering of the learning. In fact, I was watching my almost 3-year-old granddaughter the other day as she was putting a puzzle together. And she's done the puzzle probably 50 times. And as soon as she finished it, guess what she wanted to do? She wanted to do it again, because that repetition helped build her confidence. And then when she gets to a harder puzzle, she'll know she has the experience of doing puzzles. And that spaced repetition is a big part of that, because it builds our internal confidence that we can do so much better. If we don't learn to add and subtract, it's really hard to do multiplication and division. But if we learn to add and subtract, then we can go to those next layers. Then we go to algebra, we go to geometry, trigonometry, etc. But it all builds. And I think that's such an important thing. It also occurs to me that when we're studying for an exam to get the right answer, because there's no application of it after that, that's why that in 5 minutes, that answer can be gone. So really sound stuff you got going on here.
Yeah, exactly. And I love that your granddaughter actually figured out this, like the importance of repetition, and especially spaced repetition herself. And I think children are probably in some ways much better at that than we are. We have to unlearn some bad habits that we picked up in the education system first before getting to learn in an effective way again.
Building blocks, so important.
Yeah.
Well, let's talk a little bit more about yourself for a second. Do you have a routine in the morning? How do you start your day?
Yeah, I picked up a new habit a few months ago, which before going to bed, I will try to set my unconscious to think about a particular problem that I'm wrestling with. And then when I wake up in the morning, I just sit down and meditate for 10, 15 minutes. And I have a little notepad in my hand, and I just write down everything that comes to mind. And so very often it turns out that basically when I was sleeping, doing nothing, my unconscious has come up with some new approach or creative solution to the problem I was struggling with. And I mean, our unconscious does that all the time, but because our bad habits, like the first thing we do in the morning, we pick up our smartphone, right, and look at our emails. Basically, all the work of our unconscious is gone. And just taking that time to meditate and to reflect a bit in the morning helps us recover some of the power and the work that our unconscious is already doing. So I found that a very, very helpful habit. And generally, I like to take things quite slowly in the morning. So yeah, after the meditation, I do some yoga exercises, basically to get the blood flowing and slowly get started. And after that, I will sit down again and write down everything I've learned in the past day. Usually during the day, there's a couple of things I will just write a quick note of, but I won't have time to actually dive deeper into that. So then the next morning, I will look at those few bullet points and come back and write in full sentences what I've actually learned and what I still need to explore. So that's basically how I learn my day. And then after that, of course, the actual to-do lists starts. And I usually try to have one item every day. Like that's the one thing that I need to do. And once I finish that, the day is good. And the rest of the day, I still have to finish less important tasks.
Those are like the bonus achievements if you get the most important one done.
Exactly. Yeah.
Well, let's dig a little deeper into this. How you get your mind, say your subconscious mind, working on something during the night. How do you do that without it keeping you awake as you worry about that problem?
This has actually been a tricky one that I'm still trying to figure out. So what I do is in the evening, I will do a bit of focusing on the specific problem. So I will identify at least one problem that I want my unconscious to work on. But then, of course, I don't want to be awake because I'm thinking about it all the time. So after I focus, I will actually do another 10 minutes of meditation as well, just thinking about nothing, just focusing on the breathing. And I found that helps empty my mind while still keeping my unconscious focused on what I wanted to think about during the night. And it's not like a 100% guarantee that it will come up with creative solutions, but it does work well enough that every now and then I get like a surprising idea or a new approach that I hadn't thought of before.
Somebody once described the way our minds work. They're like a sandbox in a children's playground, that by the end of the day, it is just a mess. It's uneven. There's holes in it. There's leaves and weeds and maybe even an occasional animal in there. But then during the night, somebody comes through and rakes the whole thing, cleans it out, smooths the sand. And if we can avoid tracking it in the next morning, first thing, then we can find some really cool treasures in there.
Wow. I love that analogy. Yeah, I think it describes very well what I try to do as well.
You know, you've been an entrepreneur. You started this business now, and I think it's a subscription model. Is that right? After an initial trial period?
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah.
But I'm wondering what advice you might have for some of our listeners that are kind of stuck right now. They are discouraged. Any suggestions for those that are just not sure where to go next?
Yeah. So I think it's very important, and human nature, we always want to help people. And when we help people, it not only makes the person we help feel better, it also makes us feel better. And it doesn't really matter what the scale of helping is. If I can help just one person next door who's in need of something, and I can help them with a kind word or something very small, that just improves my mindset and my belief in the world so much that it empowers you to do much bigger things. So I think even when we're overwhelmed with everything bad that's happening in the world, there's always something, even if it's very small, someone who we can help. And once we do that, we discover new ways of how we can help more people. Maybe that's by building a business that we can scale and we can reach a lot of people with, that we can help a lot of people. Maybe it's by writing, by starting a blog that will be read by a lot of people, can help people. Or maybe it's something much smaller. Maybe it's in the local community. Maybe there are refugees in your area, and maybe you can help find a place for those. So there's always things we can help. And I think helping is the basis for most successful and like entrepreneurial endeavors. But it also is what's most empowering the most empowering thing we can do in our daily life. So I would say always focus on not on yourself, but on who's out there whom you can help right now, and go from there.
Well, I love that, Dom. Well, you have got so much to offer, a very young person having a big impact on our world. So I want to thank you for being a guest with us today.
Thanks, Dan. It was really great to be here. And I think I've gotten at least as many new insights from you as I've been able to offer here. So thank you for that. And I just want to mention, it actually created on actioncatalyst.traverse.link. There's a little bonus for listeners that will help you remember better what you read. So there's a little bonus included.
Okay, that sounds great. Well, thank you so much, Dominic. Dank je wel.
Thank you, Dan. It was great to be here.
If you enjoy this podcast, please make sure to subscribe. To stay updated on everything that the Action Catalyst is up to, make sure to follow us on Facebook and Instagram at Action Catalyst Podcast and Twitter at Catalyst_Action. Thanks for listening.